Hello, everybody. My name is Bennett Tchaikovsky, also known as the accounting professor. So today we're going to have a little bit of video, and I'm making this video because I've had a few students who have not passed the CPA exam, and in particular fall under the new format changes. And so this question is coming directly from the FAR Facebook group. This is anonymous, so, but this really, I think, best encapsulates it. Failed FAR with a high 60s, and the first time they took it, I felt confident with the multiple choice questions, but I felt like the sims were much more difficult than Becker. I took the last simulated test a few days before the exam, and I got a low 60s. I'm not sure if I should start from scratch with all the topics or just study the weak areas. Also not sure how to prepare for the simulations. I feel like Becker doesn't have enough simulations and they are not as complex as the ones in the exam. I think I did well in the multiple choice questions because there were lots to practice from and they were comparable to the ones on the test. I also got a sim on the topic that was not even covered in Becker. Any advice? Thanks. Okay. So first thing I want to share with you, and when I've had conversations with students, I'm not going to say what was on their exam, because if you do, you're going to get in trouble with your board of accountancy, and you do not want that. You cannot discuss any exam questions. That is absolutely going to basically violate AICP. And you'll actually, there's a multiple choice question on like discussing CPA exams. So we're not going to discuss any questions in particular, but I am going to share with you some of my different thoughts and the like. So this is a new CPA exam, right? So they went through and they moved off a lot of the state and local governments. They put that on to different exams. And, the real big differences seem to be is that there seems to be a lot of unneeded information in the questions, meaning that you have to be able to discern quickly as to what is relevant and what is not relevant. And the questions they're asking you are, when they described it to me, it's pretty heavy intermediate accounting. Now, why is it that when you look at the big, if you took intermediate accounting and your exams were all multiple choice questions, and I'm not saying as an educator, you've watched my videos, I am huge on problem-based questions, and this is for the exact reason. MCQs, lots to practice from, right? And oh boy, you get those, there's an explanation, but when it comes to simulations or problem-based questions, these are really messed up. And in fact, I'll try to go through and find for you a link to a video that I did where it was on non-current bonds or non-current debt. That video took me 3 times to go through and to make it, and it is heavily intricate. So if you took, and remember, when I took accounting at UC Santa Barbara, my intermediate instructor, who is Henry Sander, if you're watching this video, dude, shout out and props to you. All my other later students really appreciate you wherever you may be. I hope you're still with us. You were absolutely amazing because you really just beat the crap out of me academically when I was at UCSB. I mean, his exams were just insane. But when you look at it, I think what is really going to mean the best in terms of preparation and what academics need to change, especially at preparing our students, is you need to use more problem-based questions. I think you got to throw out the multiple choice. You got to go problem-based for intermediate accounting, and there's going to be a lot of professors that are not going to want to do that because it takes more work in terms of grading. But problem-based, in my opinion, for intermediate accounting is the way to go. And in terms of, how to go through, now the big question is what do we do? Right. So this is not just one person. This is a lot of people out there that are absolutely going through and feeling this. Right. So what do we do? Okay. So the first thing I would actually go through and do is and by the way, this is not just limited to Becker, it's also with UWorld. I would call up your review course provider, call the helpline, and tell them exactly what's going on. Say, I just got this score. What are you guys going to do to go through and update the material? Right? That's a tough question to ask, but it's like you're not the only one who's going through and feeling this, because a lot of times, if you went through and did use Becker, UWorld, Gleim, Surgeon, Ninja, whatever it may be, yeah, what are you planning on doing? I paid this money for the review course for an unlimited lifetime. Where's my value? What are you going to go through and do? Um, and the other thing you could do, although I really don't recommend this, I really don't recommend this. However, if you've not passed the exam, and like, look, it happens, dude, and it's like, when you get to the CPA exam, it is an absolute beast. And if you haven't gone through it, like, look, and I can tell you from when I talk to students, I generally know, and this is not always the case, it used to definitely be before the changes, but I would kind of know as to whether or not they basically passed the exam. And it was based on solely how many times did you go through the material? How many times did you go through and practice it? That's really what I would kind of tell you, is you have to do a self-assessment, right? So for this student, should you start from scratch or just study the weak areas? I think what I would do, I would kind of go back and really kind of look at I would kind of go back and start, looking at the material, take a little break, do a little bit of a time for a self-assessment, contact Becker, contact you, whoever your provider is, ask them. But I really honestly think that you have to do a self-assessment. And I think the biggest self-assessment is going to be is when you were taking the courses. And I've always said this, the amount of time you need to study for the CPA exam is directly related to how much time did you put into taking intermediate accounting. For FAR, the CPA exam is the great equalizer. And it's like it basically separates everything. Half of the questions are problem based. And so you really have to know with what to go through and do. So if you were taking intermediate accounting, and if all the questions were multiple choice, I think what I may do is to first start out with your Becker or with your UWorld, and then I might go back and look at intermediate accounting. But I really don't recommend this, because the people that are writing Becker and UWorld are absolutely top notch. The teams that they have in place are really, really good. And I think we're right now, unfortunately, under an adjustment period, right, in terms of getting the material ready for you. But I think also at this time, what I would also really go through and do is, how are you going through and taking the CPA exam, right? What are you going through and doing to prepare for it? So I would say one is using Microsoft Excel or replicating the exam testing conditions as much as you possibly can. Okay, so what I mean by this is that when you're going through and studying, use, like, you've been through the exam once, go back and make sure that when you're studying in the future that you've got the same thing happening around you, so that when you get to the testing center, it's going to feel more familiar. That would be the first thing I would kind of go through and say. The second one is, what is your skipping the easier questions and going back to the more challenging ones. Okay. And what I mean by this is that when you sorry, skipping the difficult questions and going and basically skipping the difficult questions, doing the easier questions, and then going back to the more challenging questions. And when I say this, it's really because this is a psychological test, right? So it's really saying within these 4 hours, like how can you handle it, right? And the other problem is too, like when I took the exam, it was pencil and paper, no calculators. I took it in May of 1991. Once you go through your first testlet, which has like the 25 or whatever it is questions, and you start the second testlet, you can't go back to the first. One of my students says, "Oh, I remembered something from the first one." And it's like, "Oh no, it's too late. You can't go back." So you really want to make sure that as you're going through and do like, look, and this is what, and he absolutely said this correct, is that, boy, I think I did well in the MCQs. And it's because if you've done those enough times, the multiple choice questions and the CPA review, and the CPA exam, and the reason why I don't give multiple choice questions for financial, managerial, or intermediate accounting is because I know that the CPA exam, when they're testing you, the way that those multiple choice questions are worded are funky, right? They're really, really different. And the Becker and the UWorld do a great job in terms of basically getting you ready for that. So when it comes to multiple choice questions, skip the difficult ones, do the easier ones for you, build your confidence. That's the most important thing you can do. And then go back to the more challenging questions. Remember, if you get to a part on the exam, and this happened to me, and I'll link the videos on this on my own personal CPA exam journey. There was one of the exams where I literally guessed on 40 of the 60 multiple choice because they threw in a bunch of new stuff and I had no idea what it was. But as it turns out, even the review company that I used, which was a predecessor to UWorld, which was all live instruction, which was pretty amazing. But my predecessor to UWorld was like, wow, yeah, we don't know what the answers are either. It could be A or D. So when you see those kinds of things, like remember that when they're putting questions on the exam, it's going to be tough. So skip around when you're doing the multiple choice, best possible thing you can kind of go through and do. One of the other things you need to do is to make sure you are taking care of yourself, exercising, and eating right, eating well. You have to be in top physical and mental shape for this exam. One of the things one of my students told me is, Bennett, you gave me great advice. And I've said this before, but it was like, oh, I went on hike. I told her to go on hikes. She went on hikes. It cleared her mind. Go on walks, right? Do those kinds of things, right? And really important to do because this is a very stressful test. And like, look, if you're working 80 hours a week in busy season, okay, and you're going to give yourself 2 weeks off, that's probably not going to work out. And the reason is because that week after you're done working 80 hours a week, your body is decompressing. It's like if you've been submerged in the ocean and you're coming up, if you come up too quickly, you'll blow up, right? Same thing. You're going to have to basically decompress. And this is why getting this exam done before you start working full time is absolutely the most critical thing you can do. Take it as early as you can. Absolutely do it. So make sure you're taking care of yourself. And lastly, I would really, when it comes to the simulations, this is really where I think that if you've taken the exam, I would go back and look at Kiso and Weingant, their problems, or I would go to Spiceland, which is the other major intermediate accounting textbook, McGraw-Hill. And I would go through and look through their problems. And I would try to see that if you see questions that are somewhat similar to what you saw on the CPA exam, and that's just you because you've taken the exam, you're not revealing it to the world. You're just going back and looking at questions because remember, if you talk about any CPA exam questions on any website or anything, you're going to get in trouble. So just remember that as you're going through and doing it, right? So, I mean, I would really on this one here on the simulations, I think what I would do going back to the view, going back to the anonymous poster, which is again, is a great question and really inspired me to make this video. So thank you to Anonymous for doing this, for posting this up. I think my best advice might be is to take a little break, but then I would go back and I would start reviewing, pull out your intermediate accounting book if it's, you know, and I would start going through and looking at the solutions or looking at the questions that are being asked to see if you can find things that are somewhat similar to what you're seeing on the CPA exam. That may be the very best way to go. Because, and this is after calling Becker and UWorld saying, hey, dude, I paid a lot of money for this review course. What's going on? What are you going to do? And I think that that would probably be the best strategy to kind of go through and employ. I do know that I had a student under the old FAR. I taught him online synchronously both semesters of intermediate accounting. I've only taught the intermediate, the second part of intermediate only once, but he took me for both of them. And he got an 88 on FAR, and this is the older version, which, you know, this also had a lot of the government stuff. And I said, was there anything I did not cover? He's all, no, you got everything. So again, I would really go back, you know, again, if you had to go back to an intermediate accounting text, at least do so with, oh, am I seeing similar questions to what I saw on the CPA exam? I think that that's basically going to be the best, basically best thing for you to do. Now, in terms of what I'm planning on doing, I am absolutely going to contact UWorld. I am absolutely going to go through and contact Becker, and I will be asking them, hey, guys, on your behalf. And you know, I'm constantly, I do have, if you're interested in UWorld, I can get you this course for a much lower price on this. Like, you know, it's a decent amount lower, right? But I don't, you know, when it comes to recommending CPA review, I really don't. What I need to tell you is like, I'm not getting paid by UWorld or by Becker or by any of these courses for anything. There was a CMA guy who sent me over uh, some CMA materials to do an unboxing, but I didn't get paid for that. It's fine. Not what I would not want to get paid. Um, I don't get paid for those kinds of things, but I think that what I would really advise you when it comes to CPA review is number one, do not go cheap. Okay. If you see a low price, that never works out. Rather, you have to test drive them, see which one is the best for you. If you want to get a better price on the Premier Unlimited for UWorld, you can send me an email and you can send it to ivc32cpa@gmail.com. And I'd be more than happy to, if you send me an email to this address. I love it how much spam I'm starting to get because I put this email out there. But if you want to send me an email to this address and say, hey, Bennett, I'm interested in the UWorld, I will absolutely make you an introduction to the representative. So in any event, hey, just don't look, when you are going through and your goal is to become a certified public accountant, do not give that up. I can tell you right now, the job market for, you know, I had a student who graduated from Haas. She was an IVC student. She went to Haas, didn't study accounting, but Haas is one of the top 5 undergraduate business, uh, business programs in the country. Um, she then came back, and when she was about to start a job this August, the firm that she was supposed to start with pushed off her start date by a year. Effectively, yeah, you're done. And I just want to really encourage you, like, don't give up. If you need help with intermediate accounting, I have made a lot of videos on different topics in intermediate. If you're going through and you want more problems focused on something, you can send me an email and I can see if I have time to do it. I will absolutely go through and do it. But, don't give up, stick with it. And look, if you didn't have, if you had all multiple choice questions when you were going through and taking intermediate accounting, that's okay. You're just going to have to go back and start solving problems. And the best way to do that is picking up pencil and paper, pen and paper, and just handwriting it out. Because at least for me, that's how I learned accounting. And many of my students now, that's probably the best way to really cement it. And that's what I've heard back from employers. But in any ways, best of luck to you. If I can be of any assistance, feel free to leave comments below. And I want you to pass far. I want you to pass the CPA. Want you can become a CPA. It's so hugely important. We have a shortage in the country. And I look forward to seeing you on future videos. Any other questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below.